Ferrari are seemingly back on track to become a force to be reckoned with and a constant challenger for wins, and that quest will be put to the test in Monza. This is the track on which the Maranello squad will bring a massive upgrade package that will be different from the others due to the data they've obtained in the past couple of races. Obviously, the team has gone backwards ever since Spain, but that is about to change on their home turf, as everything they've picked from Zandvoort as well as the summer break is now going to be gelled into one package that the team is adamant will take them up there with McLaren and Red Bull. With this in mind, can Ferrari become a very important factor in the championship, and if so, is the Constructors still up for grabs? Ferrari have been quite disappointing in terms of race pace and delivery of upgrades in the past couple of races, especially if we are to look at how everything has gone down from Spain onwards. The SF24 has gone through constant changes in the setups, and the drivers just couldn't find the sweet operating spot. But after the great tyre degradation in Zandvoort that helped Leclerc finish on the podium and Sainz right behind him at P5, Ferrari are now looking to continue the momentum in Monza with the latest upgrade package of the car. Monza is a circuit that suited them well in the past couple of years, and if we are to remember 2023, Ferrari were quite competitive here due to the low drag specifications of the car that suit them extremely well on low downforce circuits. On top of that, the straight line speed was their ace in the sleeve, which is something they'd have to retrieve here again, and the upgrade package will aim directly at this. Vasseur has hinted that the package would arrive at their home track in Monza, and Leclerc continued to talk about this to a greater extent, further stating, "It's super important that we finish on the podium before Monza. I think we've had 3 or 4 races where we were experimenting quite a lot to try and understand what were the fundamental issues of our car for the development medium term. We've got an upgrade coming very soon. Now I can say that, actually, because Fred said it will be in Monza, and that, I hope, will help us close the gap. But until the upgrades, I always said the priority for us was just to do a damage limitation, and in Zandvoort we were targeting P6. Realistically, on paper, that's what we were fighting for. However, now I just hope that the upgrades help us do a step forward." One thing that Ferrari has managed to work on successfully is the performance on Sunday, which has seemingly improved a lot because the team was known to have a great one-lap pace, but the tyre degradation was killing their race throughout the last 2 years. Vasseur has been highly praised for what he's been doing from 2024 onwards, mostly because of the conservative approach with the car and not going to wild lengths to find performance on it, which comes at a great risk of losing months of development too. But even with a safe take on things, Ferrari managed to get themselves behind McLaren and Mercedes on many races in 2024 after Imola. This tends to change in the upcoming period because these cars operate in such a precise window that a small setup could change everything, and you could become the 4th fastest car after being the fastest one in the previous event. Of course, this is a risk that Ferrari knew before taking a huge step with their massive upgrades in Barcelona, but luckily for them, they're now optimistic that they can be back in the fight with McLaren and Red Bull, and what is very important is that the data obtained from Zandvoort is indicating only positive things for the team to come. Still, the precautionary measurements are present in the team, and when talking about it, Leclerc said, "Again, it's very, very difficult to predict the next 3 races. If you have asked me that question on Saturday, I would have told you that it would be very difficult. Sunday was much better, and if we manage to understand what is going on with our car, then I'm quite optimistic about the future. But for now, we don't quite have the understanding yet." Of course, a huge chunk of this will be defined with the Monza upgrades, because the team has labelled it with a similar importance like how they did with the Barcelona upgrades. It's going to define the remainder of the season for them. The good news again is that while the margins of McLaren seem to be too big to be caught, Ferrari are still very much in the fight for P2 in the Constructors' Championship, because the difference between them and Red Bull is now just 64 points. Even more importantly, the gap to McLaren is just 34 points, but the momentum is heavily on the Woking-based squad, and unless Ferrari finds a massive chunk of performance like their rivals McLaren did, it would be hard to keep the third seat as it stands, because Mercedes won't be sitting around and waiting for a miracle to happen. While the focus has been shifted to 2025 a bit earlier this season, it doesn't mean that the 2024 car will stop with the development, especially now that there is a chance for both of the drivers to push the team to second in the Constructors' Championship and maybe take the fight to McLaren as well. Fred Vasseur remains optimistic that both of the championships are still in play, even though Leclerc's gap to Verstappen is far greater than the one of Norris. The Monegasque is 103 points behind the three-time world champion. You can never know how the races will end up, and there are always mechanical failures that you can pray for, as well as bad circuits like Singapore and Baku for the Austrian team. But nevertheless, if you are not there to take the momentum in your hands, then it's hard to believe that this is possible on pure merit. Elaborating on the team's hopes for 2024, Vasseur said, "Red Bull dominated at the beginning. Then we did well, then McLaren, and finally Mercedes. It will be a roller coaster until the end. I think we're already fighting for the World Championship this year. We won races, so the potential is there despite some mistakes. And in any case, the development of the 2025 Ferrari is proceeding well." Indeed, Ferrari won 2 races this season, but the circumstances were quite interesting. In Monaco, they had the most superior car due to the development being heavily in their favour and overtaking being nearly impossible here, and in Australia, Sainz was able to capitalise on a brake failure of Verstappen, which was followed by a P2 finish of Leclerc as well. Ferrari is now aiming to return to this step when they were constantly the first or the second fastest team on the grid, and if we are to judge by the volatility of things in Mercedes and McLaren, especially in McLaren with how fast they've turned the tide in their favour, this cannot be excluded for Ferrari either. But the team is now aware that there are multiple threats they have to deal with if they're back in contention, and according to the departing Carlos Sainz, the greatest threat is McLaren, who will be constantly fighting for race wins from now on. The standard has been raised by Zak Brown's team, and they have mounted a great challenge for every other team, including Red Bull, and when talking about this, Sainz said, "Things are so close. The only certainty is McLaren, who will be at the front in every race. And then, between Red Bull, Mercedes and us, the podiums will be divided. Max is always there because we already know what Max is, but the rest are also there. The podium for Ferrari is possible in every race in 2024. As all things stand, the upcoming races are suiting Ferrari a lot, and if we are to look at the second race win in Sainz's career last year in Singapore, we would note that a similar scenario cannot be excluded for this year too. Red Bull have dropped out of Q2 in that race due to a flaw that is now even more exposed as the other teams have caught up, so it's safe to say that many would be waiting for Baku and Singapore to try and take as many points from Red Bull as possible, further stirring up the drivers and the Constructors' Championship. With all this in mind, do you think that Ferrari can fight in both of the championships with the latest upgrade package that is to arrive in Monza? And more importantly, do you think they have what it takes to turn the fortunes around in the remainder of the 9 races, which include 3 sprint events too? Let us know in the comments below.